Hey, there we go. So tonight's focus is how we go about conducting, or I should say, sorry, how we go about preparing for and then conducting, and also the follow-up with respect to a focus group. I've got a few objectives for this evening, and it's really quite simple, but I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail, so hopefully that will help you. But tonight's objectives are to understand the principles of how we structure focus group interviews for research, because the way in which we prepare for it and structure how it's going to be operationalized is actually going to give or determine for us a lot of the successes as to the data we're going to get. And everything we do in research, at least when we look at something like methodology, right? Everything we do in research is about making sure that we as researchers are setting ourselves up to get the data that we need to be able to answer our research questions. So planning before executing is very important. I then want to move into understanding the best practice roles and activities for a moderator. And you might say, why did he use the word moderator and not interviewer or researcher? Because sometimes, even though we are the researcher, we might not be the person conducting the focus group. And that's ethically acceptable. It's also a good strategy if you have multiple focus groups or multiple geographies that you're working with. Or it could be due to linguistic issues. Maybe you're wanting to communicate with a group, but you don't speak the language that they do in a sufficient capacity. So it might be easier to get somebody else who is fluent to run the focus group. So that becomes the moderator, the person who's running the focus group. If it's you, same principles apply. It's not like, oh, it's different, but it's just the fact that you can have somebody else doing that. And the final element of this particular one is to understand how to design questions and discussion flow for maximum usable output. And really what I want to do there and what I'm going to talk about is, look, how do we not only structure the focus group itself, how do we choose the questions that we're going to use, the themes that we're going to talk about, the questioning techniques that we are going to use so that you're actually getting data that you can use. And that's the most important thing for us as researchers. So let's get started with some characteristics of focus group. And I call it focus group interviews because there's a lot of overlap between a one-on-one interview and a focus group. They're different, but they're same or similar at the same time. So a lot of the advice that you get for conducting interviews, the advice applies here to conducting focus groups and vice versa. Some people, if you go to some of the older textbooks, they're always called focus group interviews. Focus group became the shorter point. Let's start off with participants. Effectively, what you want to do is be very careful with the participants that you want to involve in a focus group. Make sure that you carefully recruit the participants to represent. To represent your sample is one thing, but you've got to make sure that those who are coming into a focus group are going to contribute. Let's give an example. Imagine here today we have 30 over people in the Zoom room, and imagine this was a really big focus group because it'd be pretty hard to manage, but we're part of a focus group. And if none of you participated, if you just all sat there and let me talk, which kind of you are already, but later you have to ask me questions. But imagine if you all just sat there and nobody talked. Now, in that case, I've got a focus group that I'm not getting data from. So I need to be very careful. Imagine I wanted to do a focus group based on understanding students who were doing a Doctor of Business Administration rather than a Doctor of Philosophy. Some of you guys are PhD students. I don't want to talk to you. So whatever you contribute is not going to be helpful to my research. Even though you're all doctoral students or doctoral candidates, my research only wanted DBA candidates, for example, and there might be 4 or 5 DBA candidates in the room tonight. So you've got to be very cautious, You've got to be very cautious about how you go about recruiting the participants and making sure that they're going to meet your needs. So as you're looking at recruitment, you might want to think about filter questions. A filter question is to help make sure that the person is going to, has the right knowledge for what you need. You know, that they've got the ability, they've got the knowledge in their minds to be able to answer the questions that you want, that they have access to the info and all of that. But B, you want to make sure that they're going to contribute and are able to speak up and be part of the discussion rather than anything else. In terms of choosing the number of people for a focus group, typically a focus group is between 5 to 10 people. I say 6 to 8 is the optimal number, the preferred number. This is not about how much data you can get. This is about, as a moderator, as a researcher, how can you manage a group of people that you're talking to? How can you manage to make sure that you're getting the data that you need, that's appropriate? How can you handle the interaction between different people? If I did, we've now got 39 people in this room. If we had a focus group right now, even though I've done these for years, I could not handle a functioning focus group with that many people. It would drive me crazy because not only would everybody be wanting to talk, things would be happening so fast that I would struggle to be able to keep up, to be able to take notes. Even I'm recording it, I'd still have to come back like 5 times to listen again and to get things. But I would miss so many opportunities. Plus, you're always going to have people that have a dominant voice, and you're going to have people that are not dominant in their voice. And they're going to, the dominant voices are going to take over. So if we do a focus group, 5 to 10 people, it's manageable for us as researchers. You know, it's like babysitting. If I ask you to babysit 20 children under 6, at the same time, you'd probably, oh God, no, please, no. I know I would. But if I said, look, can you look after 3 kids, for example, it's more manageable. So it's just about what's manageable. We say 6 to 8 is preferred. And the rationale for this is, look, 6 to 8 people allow for there to be a dominant voice. They're allow for there to be a couple of quieter people who need time to warm up. It allows for a manageable group discussion, which will help get data for you. And it also means group dynamics can be set up or established quite fast and quite efficiently. And your role as the researcher, as the moderator, your role is also to make sure that you can set up really positive group dynamics so that everybody wants to talk. Everybody's there to share their experience. And where possible, everybody's supporting each other in sharing that experience as well. I don't like doing focus groups under 5 people. And the rationale for that is, look, imagine I go in and I do a focus group of 3 people. I think my time as a researcher and my skills as a researcher are better used for a one-on-one interview situation where I really can go a lot deeper with my questions. And also it gives a little bit of privacy and maybe anonymity for the participants as well. So if you're sort of looking at under 5 people in a focus group, A, maybe you didn't get enough people recruited. B, change your strategy and go one-on-one, but use the same principles of themes and questions and how you want to elicit or gain answers from them in that respect. You're wanting to look at similar types of people. What you do not want in a focus group is conflict, because your job as the researcher, as the moderator, your job is to get data. Your job is to prompt people to share experience, share stories, give answers. If there is conflict in a group, you will spend more time managing conflict than you will getting research data. So by having similar types of people, there's a better chance that they are going to be positive in how they communicate, first with you, and secondly, with each other within the focus group. And the final thing is repeated groups. And what I mean by this is, look, you don't just do one focus group. You might have 37 people, as we do right now. I might break that up into 5 or 6 different focus groups, and I run them separately. But what I do is when I repeat a focus group, I have the same setup, I have the same approach, I have the same themes, and I pretty much have the same question structures and strategies. It'll change a little bit because we'll adapt according to the individuals in our group. But mostly, we're going to be able to replicate the experience. So if 5 of us or 6 of us from this room tonight do a focus group straight after, the focus group I do tomorrow with a different 6 or 7 people will actually have the same DNA, the same structure, the same scaffolding. So it's fine to repeat focus groups in that sense, and it's going to be a strategy that you might want to use. For some of us as researchers, maybe we have a team, a small team. We might have a couple of research assistants, and the 3 of us will conduct a focus group. So I might do a focus group now. My research assistant, who could be Farrell, could be in another room doing the same focus group, again, using the same outline, the same scaffolding that I've developed, and of course being trained to do it in a much the same way I would, and actually getting the data simultaneously. So it doesn't have to be one after the other. It can be 2 or 3 concurrently, but there are many ways that we as researchers can go about this. When we think about environment, and I'm going to talk mostly, this is physical environment. The environment of a focus group is where we conduct it. You don't want to go to Starbucks and hold a focus group. I know for many early career researchers, the idea, let's just go and have coffee and sit around the table in a Starbucks, that doesn't give privacy, that doesn't give a safe space. It might be comfortable or it might be convenient, but it's not actually a conducive space for us to be able to do serious research. So you've got to look at spaces that have privacy options, whether that be at your university, for example, a meeting room in your department. Not always a good idea, because then people have to come into a university department. Not every university is enjoyable. Some departments are old, all sorts of things. I personally wouldn't go to a focus group at a university department because I might get lost trying to find it. So you've got to find somewhere where you can actually conduct a relatively private focus group. The key thing is about it being comfortable. You don't want people sitting on hard seats. You don't want the room to be too hot, or just as bad, too cold. You don't want there to be noise. Imagine if, I live next to a construction site currently. During the day, you can hear dum, 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 dum. I could never do a focus group here in the daytime. So you want to make sure that it's comfortable, and that's not just comfortable for you, that's comfortable for your participants. That also means public transport is close by. Maybe they're taking a train in, or car parking is available, of which, I would say you're going to cover the cost of the car parking. You might think, why did he even mention that? When you're bringing people in for a focus group, and again, same for interviews, when you're bringing people in for a focus group, your job is to make it as comfortable an experience as possible for them, and as convenient as possible. So making sure car parking's available, making sure you've covered the cost of that, etc., etc. All of that falls on you to make sure it's easy as possible. The easier and less costly it is for a participant to join your focus group, the more likely you are to ensure their participation, which means you get data. So you've got to think the bigger picture as well. How do I make sure that I'm getting what I need? I talk about circle seating, and that's really just not sitting around a table, but just having seats that are sort of circular in nature so that you can see everybody. And the advantage of circular seating is you can look everybody in the eye as you're talking to them. So as somebody who's talking, you can look around, but as you're addressing a particular person or as somebody's speaking, everybody can see them and can look at them. And it gives more interpersonal respect. And that's important within the situation. But it's also about making everybody equal within the space. So when it comes to that, don't have 7 chairs and then an 8th chair, which is better, and you as the moderator sit in the better chair. You want to make sure everything is equal. You want to make sure it's comfortable. Do you want it tape recorded or video recorded? Now you might say, wow, Craig, you're a bit old calling it tape recorded. Sometimes we might record on our phone but not use video. So we want to make sure at least we get a voice recording from the experience. And that's going to be very, very important for us. If we are recording the session, whether it be voice only or video, we've got to make sure we get signed consent for that. So that becomes part of the statement of consent that everybody signs before the actual focus group starts. I strongly recommend video recording, which can be just putting your phone on a tripod and recording. But when I do a single video recording like this, I'm not getting my entire circle. So you might want to have 2 or 3 cameras recording the session at the same time from different vantage points. When I record or when I review back, I'm not only recording because I want to hear what was said so I can take notes, so I can transcribe. It's not only that. I'm recording. If I'm recording video, I'm also looking for body language. I'm looking for any subtle cues that individuals are giving as part of their communication that reinforces or goes against what's coming out of their mouth. So if their body language is really defensive and they're sort of sitting like this, but they're all cheerful and happy, there's a disconnect between body language and vocal words that are coming out. As a researcher, we've got to be able to pick up on those cues. When we're running a focus group, we might make note, Farrell looked defensive when talking about topic X. But when I've got video, I can come back to it and I can really focus in on it and say, you know what, is there something in this? And that also means later, I can do a follow-up maybe an interview. It might just be a simple phone call or an email or a follow-up to make sure he's okay, to ask whether that was a sensitive topic, to ask whether there was something he disagreed with but didn't share publicly within the focus group. So it gives me all these extra opportunities to try and understand what we're working with. And finally, for environment, just as we are now, it might be online. And I'm a really strong advocate for online focus groups because we're not limited to geographies. We're not limited to comfort. We're not limited to Starbucks, frankly. The challenge with online visibility, you see the head only, you see a bit of body language, but there are other issues, the ethics of going into somebody's private space. So, for example, if you were doing a focus group looking at domestic violence experiences, and you asked a respondent to join via Zoom from their home, you actually may be putting that respondent at danger because they're talking about an issue that impacts them at home, in their home where it is visible. So you've got to be very cautious about how you go about this. If you are doing online, the policies and procedures you want. Do you want the camera on? Do you not want the camera on? How's it going to be recorded? All of this becomes important for you to factor in. But I do want to say, look, an online focus group is quite acceptable. The limitation you get is you don't see the whole body. So you can come back, you can listen to everything. You can transcribe it. I mean, even Zoom will give you a transcription of everything that was said, and that's great. But you lose some of the context of body language. And although you might think people are more comfortable in their own spaces, people may be shyer or less comfortable speaking out about something in their own space because of who else is listening within that environment as well. So from an environmental perspective, these are the things to think about as you're preparing for your focus group. Now we talk about the moderator, which could be us as the researcher. But as I said earlier, it does not have to be us. My honest advice is, look, it is actually much better if it is you as the researcher running the focus group. I think as we develop as researchers, as we get further into our career, whether it be academic or anything else, okay, as we get further into our career, getting other people on as moderators is easier to do. But I do strongly say, look, unless language is an issue, unless geography is an issue, in which case we can solve geography as an issue with Zoom or related technology. But unless those are an issue, you should be able to run the focus groups yourself. It's a very good skill development for you as a researcher, and it's a very good communication development for you as a researcher. The focus for us is, look, as a moderator, whoever it is, but I'm going to assume it's us, okay, you need to be skillful in group discussions. If you're a shy person who doesn't like talking to others, really, I don't recommend that you choose to be to use focus groups or to be a focus group moderator, because you have to be good at discussion. You have to be willing to, force conversation. You have to be able to motivate other people to speak. If you sit there and you go like, good morning, hang on. Good morning. My name is Craig. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Life. I would like to conduct a focus group with you. Please state your name. Lost all engagement. Now, the truth is, many of us are like that the first couple of times we do it. So in terms of that, even we should practice on our friends and family before we go into the real situation. If you're shy, get some coaching. If you're shy, get someone to help, but don't take yourself out of that experience. Focus on predetermined questions. And I don't mean word for word, but always have a set of themes that you want to talk about. Now, the reality is we don't want a focus group to really go above 90 minutes, 1.5 hours. It can go to 2 hours. You know, sometimes that's a nice, natural conversation. It's not a bad number. But if you go beyond that, believe me, it is going to be incredibly exhausting for everybody, and you are going to lose their interest. So you want to sort of make sure that you've got enough themes to go through and talk, that you've got specific questions that you need to ask under each theme, and that you've got some sort of pointers or conversation starters. Because again, this is not an interview per se. I'm not, what do you think of ABC? I'm going to elicit from you, I'm going to get you to talk about it, but I'm not asking you as a question. If I just say, what do you think of ABC? I could have asked that as a survey, and we could have both had a better time doing something else somewhere else. So it is a discussion, but have those themes, have those questions, have that available for you. You also want to, as the moderator, as the researcher, but as the moderator, establish a permissive environment or a safe space. And that's really about being open to people sharing, including negative stories, but also that you're there to support them. You know, if they're going to share something that happened to them, you've got to be a supportive group. So, for example, maybe if we're doing a focus group on domestic violence and you want people to share experiences of when their partner or their spouse physically abused them or threatened them, you want to make sure that everybody in the room, everybody in the group is going to be there to share. You don't want somebody saying, you deserved it, or so what? You want to make sure that that person can speak, can be heard, and you want to make sure that everybody else is there to say, we understand. Do you need to take a break? Do you need this? That there's support. So it's very important that you establish, and you can do this through how you open up, how you start off the start of a focus group, which I'll share shortly with you as well. But you want to be able to make sure that you establish it as a safe space. And it's also a safe space that, look, you can share anything you like in this group, and it does not go out of here. So the common phrase is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So basically what happens in the focus group stays in the focus group. Other participants also don't go off and tell their friends or family or whatever the stories that were told. So it's about ethics, it's about trust, but it's our job to make sure people feel comfortable within that environment. We also have to think about analysis and reporting. So in order to set up a focus group, so that we get useful data for our research, we have to think about this, and it's systematic analysis. How am I going to go about analyzing the data that I get? So if I'm recording it, am I getting a transcript? Am I using in vivo to analyze the transcript in a certain way? What type of output am I getting from that analysis? So we want to be able to think about. Now that, as with everything, we often think about how do we design it first. The first question for us as a researcher is actually, what data do I need, and in what format will that data be valuable to me? And then I work backwards. So that, by understanding what I need, I can frame the questions I need. I can frame the themes I need. But I can also know in advance, oh, I need to use NVivo as my analysis software. Or I only need a transcription because what I'm looking for is stories. What I'm looking for is narratives. And a transcription will give me enough. And I want to extract from that transcription key sentences that different participants have said. And then I'm going to wrap those up and make an analysis myself of them. So that's important for us to think about. We want verifiable procedures. And what I mean by that is, if I come along, say, for example, I'm your supervisor, or I'm the head of department, whatever, if I come along, I can go through exactly what you've done and come up with similar results, which basically means how you set up your focus group, how you conducted your focus group, and how you analyzed the data obtained from that focus group. I can repeat that. That's verifiable. I know it happened. I can repeat it. That's all that matters. And the final one is appropriate reporting. Appropriate reporting is about how you take the data that has been provided, extracted within the focus group, and report it in an appropriate manner. That means you're not twisting words. You're not taking a negative phrase, cutting a couple of words out of it and trying to convert it into something positive. You're simply representing it as it was there. And that comes down to, look, you have got copies of all your data. That's on file for the university. You're being transparent in how it's being reported, including whether you want to use pseudonyms or whatever, but you're not misrepresenting anything that was stated during the focus group scenario. That's a personal ethics thing. Sometimes it's hard to verify. Sometimes we're not even going to think about whether we want to verify it or not. But in case somebody did, it should be there. In your Viva, for example, I might come along and I might ask you questions about the process and how you ensured that you did or you undertook appropriate reporting in that process. Now let's move on to questions and eliciting participation. So up until now, it's looking at what do I need to do to prepare myself for a focus group. Now I want to move into questions and making sure that we get people able to participate, that we get people giving us information, sharing with us. Because again, a focus group where nobody's talking is a failure, and we don't want that situation. We'll start off with moderator skills. So these are the skills that you need to have as a moderator. So to host a focus group, to lead a focus group, these are the skills. First, select the right moderator. So again, I'm strongly advocating the moderator, at least at PhD level, should be yourself. Further down, you can get research assistants. Fantastic. That's going to be an easier task, but I think it should be you where possible. But if it cannot be you, make sure you've got somebody who understands fully your research, your objectives, is able to communicate well. And it's really having all of these things, I guess, with it. You might want to consider using an assistant moderator, and that means having somebody to help you. So say, for example, I come along and I'm going to do a focus group. I might ask Farrell to join me, and his role is not necessarily to ask questions, but his role as an assistant moderator might be to take some notes, or it might be to look at body language. So I might say, look, Farrell, you're here. your job is focus on everybody's body language and make notes about any unusual body language or not concerning body language, but different body language that you feel I need to come back to think about. Or it could be as simple as, can you just make sure all the technology works and, check the cameras working, check we haven't run out of battery, all of that sort of stuff. It can be as simple as that. You need to be mentally prepared. That means not only are you going in, you remember your questions, you know what you want to get, you've sort of got everything there, but you're also ready to handle the worst. And the worst might be a group who doesn't talk to you, or the worst might be having a participant who wants to take over the conversation and not let anybody else speak. And we've all been to a scenario where somebody's spoken up and 10 minutes later they have not shut up. And that happens in focus groups. So you've got to be able to make sure that you're prepared to handle that. You need to know as a moderator how to have purposeful small talk. Don't go in and like, have you had lunch? That's a very Malaysian thing. Eaten yet? That's not the right small talk. It's not about, did you find it hard to get here? It's not about that. It's about small talk that helps bridge different themes. It's about when you see that somebody might be a little uncomfortable, or you see the discussions sort of veering the wrong way, it's being able to nudge it back towards something else. But rather than jump into a really heavy question, you might want to sort of do something smaller, or you might want to change the topic, and you might sort of just move into something adjacent. But it's not data you need. It's a technique to make sure that you're getting the person there. Normal small talk, which is equally as valid, okay? Normal small talk is, look, some people will come early. You don't want them sitting there thinking, wondering what's happening. You want to be able to, how are you? Want to tell me a bit about yourself? Where was your last holiday? I hate small talk personally. I think it's a horrible thing unless you know somebody. But as a moderator, you have got to be able to work with this. You want to make a smooth and snappy introduction. I'm going to give you an example soon, but it's really, you get started and you just get into it. If you spend so long introducing the purpose of what you're going to do, they'll probably fall asleep before you get any data. You also want to use pauses and probes. So pauses is taking a moment and using those moments, giving yourself time to think, giving others time to think. It's really just how you communicate, how you ask questions, how you respond, but it's also giving that space. The probe is asking a little bit more. How do you get more information, more detail from something? So if somebody sort of said, we were focused on X, Y, and Z, we saw this, we experienced this. A probe might be, so as you're experiencing this, what was going through your mind? Or, how did you feel about that situation? What did you do afterwards? Did you need to take some time to think about what happened and to reflect and to change behavior? All of those are probes, but it's just making sure that you can get extra information that you need for yourself. You want to be able to record the discussion. Now, that doesn't mean just using, technology to record. I'm very old school. So those of you who have known me for a while, I use pen and paper, and I'll just put this up a little closer. This was from a meeting I did a few days ago. It's a total mess. I know what it means. That's my record. So recording the discussion or record the discussion is also about, how do you take notes? What notes do you take? Are you taking notes on things that people have said? Are you taking notes about body language? Are you taking notes and saying, Farrell's answer didn't seem that credible. I want to come back and review what was said because it doesn't all line up for me. So, it's about what you're going to do. And it can be, do you want a pen and paper? Do you want a tablet computer? Or are you quite happy to let the video cameras around the room record everything for you and you come back to it later? So it's about your engagement with the subject material. Most will say, look, excuse me for a second. Also a pause. Most will say, look, I'm recording it, that should be enough. Others will say, I like to take notes because my engagement with the responses, my engagement with the participants is at a greater level of detail than just talking and asking questions and getting answers and, facilitating a discussion. My engagement with them is everything else that I think about. What do I note about their personality? What do I note about their mannerisms, their behaviors, and so forth? All of that is valid as well. You need to be able to control your reactions to participants. A focus group is kind of like a small child at Christmas. Imagine at Christmas time, you give a small child a pair of socks instead of a PlayStation. The child is not going to be happy. So you're going to get a very raw, honest reaction from them. Be like, I don't like this present. That happens, You have got to be able to make sure that no matter what your participants say, you can proceed. So you might get a sexist comment, you might get a racist comment, you may get an inappropriate comment. You've still got to be able to manage that person and move the discussion on without spending too much time dwelling on that and missing the important components of the focus group itself. Now, the controlling your reactions is about how I respond to hearing something I don't like. So, I'm not even going to try and think of examples here because all of mine are really quite offensive. But imagine I hear something I don't like. If I go, oh, now I've already influenced everybody else. I've got to be as neutral as possible. I'm there to facilitate a discussion. So I've got to control that. But I've also got to be able to control everybody else's understanding, response to, and reaction to what is said as well. I need to be available to use subtle group control. Again, each focus group will be different. The dynamics will be different. And the way in which the group develops and communicates with each other may be different. But if you get a group who constantly talks, that's great. But if you're not leading that discussion or steering that discussion down the direction of where your data requirements are, you've lost control. And you might not get the data you need. So you've got to be strong enough to be able to keep everybody on focus, on track, but not so strong that they feel like they can't share or that they're not in a safe space. And the final one is you've also got to be able to know at what point do we draw a conclusion. And we draw a conclusion to a focus group, A, when you've got the data that you need, B, when the individuals in the focus group have finished sharing the important elements of their narrative that they want to share with you. But you've also got to be able to say, you know what, we have to draw a line here. This, the focus group is finished, but you're welcome to head to Starbucks outside and continue talking with each other and sharing with each other. Unfortunately, I can't join you for that, but you're more than welcome to communicate and stay in touch with each other afterwards. So bringing together, knowing when to bring together a conclusion, knowing whether you want to encourage them to talk further outside or whatever, all of that is important too. So let's start with an outline. Now, if I just go back here, I said, look, make a smooth and snappy introduction. So my welcome is very simple. I'm going to introduce myself as a moderator. I also have Farrell here as an assistant. Tonight, our topic is our results are going to be used for, and you were selected to be part of this focus group because. Some very simple guidelines for you. There are no right or wrong answers. There are only differing points of view. We are recording this on video, so please, I just ask that one person speaks at a time. Raise your hand if you need to speak or whatever you want. You figure that out, right? We're on a first name basis here. You can use pseudonyms if requested or optional. Maybe the participants don't want the other participants to know their real names. So you may just randomly assign a pseudonym and make sure you have a name tag or sticker with the person's pseudonym on there. And that's what you work with. We don't need to agree with others. Chances are we won't actually, but we do need to listen respectfully to other people's views. I would request that you turn mobile phones off or at least have them on silent. We appreciate that many of you are busy people and there will be messages and things coming through, but I'd also like to request that for the next 45 minutes, we can focus on the discussion at hand first. What I will do is take a break, 30 minutes in for 5 minutes so you can check on your phones, etc., etc. My role as the moderator is to guide the discussion. And then please feel free to talk to each other. This is not about talking to me. This is about you guys talking with each other and building the narrative. And then you go into your opening questions. Now, this is an outline. It's not perfect, and it's not going to work every time in exactly the same way. But these are the things that you should consider having in your first few minutes just to get people started. And having the guidelines is simply creating, as I said, creating that safe space. Where did I put it? Yes, establishing a permissive environment or a safe space, creating that safe space so that people can open up and talk. Now we also have other moderator or assistant moderator, or I've called recorder skills. And this might be having an assistant. So I've asked Farrell to join me. He will help with the equipment, the refreshments, arrange the room, maybe welcome participants as they arrive. So, they get to know everybody. He'll sit in a designated location. So that might be outside of the circle. So before, when I said, look, you have your circular chairs, you might have a chair off to the side and he'll be sitting there, your assistant moderator, your assistant will be sitting there watching or observing or participating in the way they should, but they're not an active part of the discussion. They're not going to ask questions in most cases. Their job might be to take notes through the discussion, operate the recording equipment. As I said, they don't really participate unless you're going to play good cop, bad cop. So maybe if you have two moderators, and one is focusing on a certain set of questions, the other's focusing on others, or they're playing devil's advocate to try and probe people into giving deeper or more reflective answers. Good cop, bad cop scenario can work quite fine. They might ask questions when invited. So I might turn and say, well, Farrell, I know you've experienced this and you've listened to a few of our participants today. What's your experience? What's your take on what has happened? Their job may also be to give an oral summary. So towards the end, you might ask your assistant to do a quick wrap up, a summary of the key themes, for which everybody can then say, oh yes, but also include this, or maybe don't include that. It's different when it comes from you and somebody else, because when it comes from you, you're part of that discussion. They're probably thinking of what you want. When it's coming from someone else, they see it as more, I want to say transparent. I've actually forgotten the word, sorry. More reflective of what was actually said. So it can be good. Their job is also debrief with the moderator. So after the session, actually you sit with your assistant and you go through, you've noticed some things. You know, you listen to things, maybe you watch some body language. They might say, did you notice this? Did you see this? Or you might say, look, I saw Jack looking in a particular way. And Farrell might say, well, actually, I didn't see the same thing. I saw, but I don't agree with you. So it actually helps to reconcile some of the observations. Now, here's a really important point. As a focus group moderator, we're getting text, we're getting, verbal narrative, but we're also doing observational research. So having two people contribute to the depth of observation that is available is very helpful. And their final job is to give feedback on the analysis and the reporting, which means once you've done some analysis of the transcripts or whatever, it's also for them to be able to look through and say, you know what, you've missed the point, or I feel you haven't emphasized this strong enough. Would you like to go back and look at it? So it's really just a second viewpoint on what you're doing so that you can convey that across. Now, how we go about asking questions that yield powerful information, because this is really what it's all about. To me, if your questions are crap, you're not going to get the results that you want. So it's about getting the right questions. So for a focus group, these are the rules. They're a little bit different for an interview, because an interview, you're one-on-one, you've got time, you can correct things, you can add to things. If you're looking at a survey, you've probably pre-tested it so many times, you're making sure you've got what you want. In a focus group, you've got one chance. So we want to use open-ended questions. And the open-ended questions is really because we want to encourage them, the participants, to speak. We don't want them to just give yes, no answers. We want them to tell us what it is. So let's give a really simple example. What color is your house? Blue. Now, that gives me not a lot. An open-ended question is, why did you choose the color that your house is painted? And it could be, oh, I thought it went nice with the sky, or the previous owner chose it and I'm too lazy to repaint. At least I'm getting insight. I'm getting more depth into the answers that I want. We want to avoid dichotomous questions. And a dichotomous question is a question that is effectively fixed an answer, typically yes or no. Do you watch sports? No. Do you own a TV? No. Do you own a car? No. Yeah. I'm not getting anything that I couldn't have got out of a survey. So when I use dichotomous questions, I'm not getting any rich data. I'm not getting any depth associated with it. So I've got to be more creative. I don't like to ask why questions. Do I own a car? No. Why? It means I screwed up my question in the first place. You want to probe people. What is the advantage or disadvantage of owning a car? Now I can start getting a little bit more. So try to avoid why. Using think back questions can actually be very good. So I'd like you to think back to the last time you were in a supermarket. Did you notice something? If you're guiding people towards a particular event, now you can't determine that event, but you can guide them towards something, an event that resonates in their life. And yeah, going to the supermarket doesn't resonate much, but it's still, depending on what your research is, it still brings them back into a particular point of time. The last time you saw your college professor. What were they wearing? Not a question I should ask, but it's bringing us back to a moment in time. And you're not specifying it by saying on the 1st of January 2022. You're time sensitive to their experience rather than to yours. You want to use different types of questions. And this is, between short wording, or, short questions, longer questions, questions that make people think, questions that make people reflect, questions that make people give an opinion versus questions that make people recite fact. All of these help. The idea is questions that get participants involved. You want their narrative. You want them to speak directly to you. You want to make sure that you focus the questions. At the end of the day, a question that doesn't result in data is a waste of everybody's time, especially yours. And if it means that they get frustrated by the experience, then there's also going to be some challenge to make sure that they participate fully. And be cautious of serendipitous questions. Our whole focus is getting the narrative that we need and making sure that our questions give answers, give data that we can use. So just be cautious with that. Ending questions is about how do we wrap up the focus group per se, and it's do we want an all things considered question? So it's focusing, if we were to take the summary of today's discussion, all things considered, would we proceed with a particular type of action? Maybe we want a summary question that sort of just wraps up. So, what final words or what one piece of advice would you give people in your situation into the future? Or it might be a final question, just to wrap up and to end. What do you think about? It doesn't matter how you want to go through this, right? But you've got to think about what is the best way to end. And in respect of this also, each focus group is different. So although you have the same scaffolding, you might find that the first focus group responds well to an all things considered style of question, but you might find that the second focus group would like a definitive final question. So you let the personality of the group determine how you want to conclude, but you want to conclude on something that is really bringing you much the same way. So some strategies for focus group questions. Maybe you want to have them choose amongst alternatives. So you might have some flashcards out there. I've got a few thoughts. Can you let me know which one more closely resonates with what you're doing? You make a list. So there might be a list of questions. You may share this in advance with them so they can prepare, or you might not share it in advance so that the whole experience is very spontaneous. My advice here is, look, if you're dealing with business people and you're looking for certain things, it might be a good idea to share themes in advance so they can think through and they can prepare. If you're dealing with more sensitive issues, maybe you need to tell them, I'm going to touch upon this, but you want to get authentic reactions, so you don't give the questions in advance. Again, you have to decide what is going to work best for you in that circumstance. You can do fill in a blank questions, and that actually works in a focus group. I'm going to give you a sentence. I'm going to leave a word out. What word would you put in there? And then use that as a discussion starter to talk about why and to go deeper and deeper. You might rate them. You may even do scales. And scales, we always assign, or we always think of scales as related to surveys. But there's nothing to say that, look, on a scale, on a rating of 1 to 5, what do you feel about the current government and their performance? And again, that can be a starting point for a conversation. It's all about how you take that question and how you express it or ask it to the individuals. You might ask projection, fantasy and daydreams. Sorry, there is a spelling mistake. Projection, fantasy, and daydreams. And this is about really in the ideal world, how would situation X be handled? So that's a projection. It's also a fantasy because it depends on what you're asking. It may be, a dream. What would you want? And if you're dealing with children, so next week when we talk about creative methods and we look at different ways of eliciting ideas out of respondents, looking at how we use fantasy and daydreams and role play and all of that actually becomes important for us. We can still do some of this effectively in a focus group situation. We might want them to draw a picture. And I'm going to say, and I've put here, yes, that even works with adults. To be honest, if I come to your focus group and you ask me to draw a picture, I'm probably not going to be the happiest person on earth. But I'm not a picture drawing person. Depending on your subject, depending on what you're talking about, and depending upon the respondents that you have got, there may be, value in doing something like that. You might want to develop a campaign. It doesn't always have to be about a narrative. It can simply be about planning an activity. So like a brainstorming session. And what you're actually doing is watching how people work together and how ideas evolve so that you can express them better. You might even consider utilizing role play within a focus group. And it's not only about, say, 2 or 3 people who are undertaking a role play. It is also about how the rest of the group respond to that role play and then continue to contribute directly after that. What you do want, though, is questions that foster ownership. You want people to not own the question, but own their response to it. That, I do it this way, or I feel it's important to do it this way, etc., etc. That one is very, very important. Now, let's go into a different area. So that's been focused on, look, these are how I ask questions. These are the strategies I need as a moderator. These are the types of tools in my toolkit that I can use. Now I want to move on to an ethics side of things. And I think, it's always going to be a case where I talk a little bit about ethics because it's essential. There's always a question about incentivization for participants. Do I pay my focus group participants to be able to contribute? Right at the beginning, I said you want to ensure that participation in the focus group is as simple or as less time-consuming, less costly as possible for individuals. Incentivization in any form is ethically acceptable. It's not wrong. It can be money. Some people prefer money over anything else. That's not a problem. But if it's coming out of your pocket, make sure you've got the right budget to make that happen, okay? It could be food. Maybe they get a Starbucks voucher. Oops, I'm back to Starbucks again. What a shame. Or I might give them a voucher for McDonald's, or I might give them a supermarket voucher. Again, how you incentivize your participant also reflects your understanding of your participant as an individual, as a component of society. So you've got to look at who you want as participants, what motivates them, what they would be comfortable with. I don't like Starbucks, so if you give me a Starbucks voucher, I'm probably going to throw it away or give it to somebody else. Therefore, I can't use it. Where's the value? Where's my reward? Do you want to give gifts? Now, that's all spending money. Let's go about other incentives. I will join a focus group because I'm interested. So I'm not always looking for a financial reward or a gift to be given. I might be looking for something a little bit more intrinsic. And that can come through a positive, upbeat invitation. Maybe they're just simply interested in, how you went about things. They like your personality, whatever. They go with that. Woohoo, good. They might be interested in the opportunity to share opinions. And again, it's not about money, but they want to feel valued by contributing something. It could be something that's enjoyable for them. It's convenient and easy. They can meet new people. They might feel that contributing to an important research project is a really good thing, and that's a form of social contribution. They might want to use it to build on existing community, social, or personal relationships. So for them, it's just about meeting people and being out in the community and the relationships that can develop further from that. Or it might simply be about actually they're keen on your research and the output. So they want that research summary or they want that infographic. Now I'm going to segue a little bit and tell you a story about someone I used to know. When I was a kid, I used to be babysat by an older lady called Carol. Her two kids went to my same school. So after school, I always went to her house with the two kids. And Carol got divorced. So she got given the house. She had a lot of money, but she got a job at the local supermarket as a cashier. And, 3 or 4 days a week, she'd work in the supermarket. And she worked there for, 15 years after I left school. She was still working there. And one day I said to her, so, Carol, your ex-husband left you a lot of money. You own the house. You don't need to work. And she said, I just like talking to people. I know I don't need to work, but I like talking to people and I don't want to have to work hard. Now, that comes down to motivation. It comes down to incentivization. Her incentivization was that community, social, and personal relationships. It wasn't the money that she's earning, because that wasn't a lot, but it was the fact that she was out doing something. And the same works for people who will participate in your focus groups. Some of them do it because they want to meet new people. Some of them want to get out of their routine. They want to experience new things. As long as they are relevant for your research and for your topic, then of course it is a very positive thing to be able to do. So I'm going to hand over now